Mm, yeah. Ah, Pull up a chair. This is Shop's Corner. Little light on an ordinary day. Stories and smiles, every word warmer, pointing every heart a better way. Welcome to Shop's Corner, where the wounded rest a while, where a quiet word of faith turns to laughter, turns to smiles. Every poem, every story says you love, you still belong. This is Shop's Corner, where your heart can sing along. I kept chasing horizon.
This is the story of a 26-year-old young woman named Eliana Carter. Eliana grew up in the small town of Willow Creek, North Carolina. It was the kind of town where people knew your name, neighbors looked out for one another, and life moved at a slower pace. She loved her hometown. But like many young people, she dreamed of seeing more of the world.
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
In the heart of a quiet little town called Willow Creek lived a young girl named Eliana Carter. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know exactly where life would take her. But she knew one thing. God had placed a dream inside her heart. While other children imagined what they wanted to become, Eliana spent her days writing in notebooks, dreaming about using her voice to encourage people and tell stories that mattered. She believed that one day, somehow, God would use her life to make a difference. She couldn't see the road ahead, but God already could. Now, before we go any further, let me tell you about the family that raised her. Eliana came from a modest family. They weren't wealthy, but they were rich in love. Her mother, Naomi, was a talented seamstress. People came from all over town asking her to alter clothing, create custom pieces, or design outfits for special occasions. Her father, James, was a skilled carpenter whose hands could turn a pile of wood into something beautiful. Together they worked hard to provide for their children, not because they had a lot, but because they refused to let their children go without. Eliana also had two younger brothers, James Jr., who everyone called JR, and the youngest brother, Lucas. Their family wasn't perfect. They had struggles. They had disagreements. They had seasons when money was tight, but one thing remained constant: God. Church wasn't optional in their house. It was expected, not because their parents wanted to control them, but because they wanted their children to understand that God should never be a last resort. He should always be first. And over the years, Eliana learned something important. Their family wasn't held together by money. It wasn't held together by talent. It wasn't held together by luck. It was held together by their relationship with God. Even as a child, Eliana loved creating things. She loved writing. She loved speaking. She loved encouraging people. And as she grew older, she discovered something surprising. She had a gift for spoken word. The more she wrote, the better she became. The more she shared, the more people listened. Words seemed to come alive whenever she stepped in front of an audience. As graduation came to an end, another chapter was waiting. With a car full of dreams, a heart full of faith, and parents who had always believed in her, Eliana prepared to leave Willow Creek. Naomi hugged her tightly. James placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. They knew this goodbye wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of everything God had been preparing her for. As she looked back one last time, Eliana carried more than luggage. She carried the prayers, love, and encouragement of the family who had taught her to trust God above all else. When it came time for college, she wanted to go somewhere far enough to experience independence, but close enough that she could still come home when she missed her family. So she chose Kingston Ridge University. From the moment she stepped onto campus, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. The campus felt like possibility. Every building, every classroom, every conversation reminded her that she was stepping into a brand new chapter of her life.
Lord, guide me. Show me your path.
While many students spent weekends chasing temporary excitement, Eliana spent hers building something different. She studied. She created. She prayed. She served. And she trusted that if God had given her a gift, He would open the right doors at the right time. She wasn't looking for fame. She had no idea that every late night, every prayer, and every act of obedience was preparing her for the season that was about to begin.
I'm almost home.
One weekend after classes had settled down, Eliana packed her things and made the familiar drive back to Willow Creek. There was something she wanted to share with the two people who had believed in her from the very beginning. That evening, she sat down with her parents. Mom, Dad, I think I finally figured it out. They listened carefully as she shared her dream of creating content, telling stories, and using her voice to inspire people. Her parents smiled because they had seen that gift inside her long before she ever recognized it herself. Her father leaned forward with a gentle smile and said, "If God gave you the gift, don't bury it. Steward it. The world doesn't need another copy of someone else. It needs the person God created you to be." Eliana quietly took in every word. Then her mother smiled warmly and reached for her hand. "Success will come and go, sweetheart, but purpose will always outlast applause. As long as you keep God first, He'll take care of the rest." Those words settled deep in Eliana's heart. She didn't realize it then, but they would become the very words she would hold on to when life brought closed doors, unexpected detours, and seasons of waiting. Months later, years of studying, countless late nights, unwavering faith in God's grace had brought Eliana to graduation day. As she walked across the stage to receive her degree from Kingston Ridge University, she wasn't just accepting a diploma. She was stepping into the next season God had prepared for her. Looking into the crowd, she saw the same people who had believed in her from the very beginning. Naomi, James, J.R., Lucas. Their smiles reminded her that this achievement belonged to all of them. And in that moment, she quietly thanked God for carrying her every step of the way.
I got the PR communications job. This is real. Thank you.
Late one evening, after another long day of planning, praying, and trusting God, Eliana sat quietly at her desk. Her future was still uncertain. The applications had been submitted. The interviews were over. Now, all she could do was wait. Then, an email appeared on her screen. She opened it. Her heart stopped. She read the first line. "Congratulations, Eliana. After all the applications, after all the waiting, after all the uncertainty, the opportunity she had prayed for had finally arrived. PR Communications wanted her, not because she was the loudest, not because she was the most connected, but because God had opened a door no one could shut. The job offer wasn't just an answered prayer. It was the beginning of a new season. That weekend, the Carter family gathered around the table, not to celebrate success, but to celebrate God's faithfulness. Every prayer, every sacrifice, every season of waiting had led to this moment. As they bowed their heads and thanked God, Eliana realized something she would never forget. The greatest blessings aren't measured by titles or paychecks. They're measured by the people who stand beside you when God opens the door. Monday morning finally arrived. As Eliana walked through the doors of PR Communications, she carried more than a resume. She carried years of prayer, years of preparation, and the quiet confidence that God had brought her exactly where she was supposed to be. Everything felt new. New coworkers, new responsibilities, new opportunities. She wasn't there to impress everyone. She was there to serve with excellence. And from her very first day, she made one decision. Whatever she did, she would do it wholeheartedly, as if she were working for God Himself.
We'll reallocate budget to the top performing segments and push the influencer video this week.
As the months passed, Eliana grew into her role. She led campaigns, built meaningful relationships, and discovered that excellence opens doors. Every project sharpened her gifts. Every opportunity strengthened her confidence. God had been faithful, and she was grateful for every blessing along the way.
Hi, everyone. Let's make more people, more stories, more purpose.
Her platform continued growing. Followers increased. Partnerships appeared. More people listened to her voice. More people shared her content. More people recognized her name. Everything seemed to be moving in the right direction.
I don't know what to do next.
As the months passed, Eliana settled into her new career. From the outside, everything looked exactly as she had prayed for. She had the job. She was growing. She was making an impact. But somewhere along the way, the pressure became heavier than the purpose. Every time she opened her phone, there was another success story, another promotion, another milestone, another reminder of where she thought she should already be. The opinions of others grew louder. The comparisons became constant. And little by little, she began measuring her worth by someone else's journey. She smiled through meetings, completed every assignment, and continued showing up with excellence. But when she was alone, she quietly questioned whether she was enough. What Eliana didn't realize was that comparison wasn't just stealing her confidence, it was slowly stealing her peace. One quiet evening, after the meetings had ended, and the notifications had finally gone silent, Eliana sat alone with her thoughts. She had been telling stories. She had been building campaigns. She had been helping brands find their voice. But somewhere along the journey, she had stopped asking God about his. Then, in the stillness, she sensed him whispering to her heart, "Tell your stories, but don't leave me out." The words weren't meant to shame her. They were an invitation, a loving reminder that her greatest calling wasn't simply to build successful campaigns, but to use the voice he had given her for his glory. In that moment, Eliana realized that success could never replace purpose.
Why does this keep happening?
Not every closed door is a sign that you failed. Sometimes, it's God's way of protecting you from what you cannot yet see. The opportunity Eliana thought would last forever came to an unexpected end. She didn't understand why. She had worked hard. She had given her best. She had remained faithful. Yet the door still closed. For a moment, all she could see was rejection. But heaven saw something different. God wasn't removing her purpose. He was redirecting it. The same God who opened the first door was already preparing the next one.
I'm so grateful for every step.
That night, Eliana sat quietly with her Bible, her journal, and her thoughts. The closed doors still
I don't know
hurt.
which path to
The
take.
unanswered questions were still real. But as she reflected, she remembered where it all began. She remembered family prayers around the dinner table. She remembered Sunday mornings at church. She remembered her father's words. If God gave you the gift, don't bury it, steward it. She remembered her mother's gentle reminder. Purpose will always outlast applause. And suddenly, she realized something. The same God who had carried her through childhood, through college, through graduation, and through every open door, had not abandoned her now. The doors may have changed, but God's faithfulness never had. For the first time in a long time, Eliana stopped asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and started asking, "Lord, what are you preparing me for?"
Lord, I trust you. I am here.
That night, the noise finally faded. No deadlines, no expectations, no opinions, just Eliana and God. She knelt beside her bed, just as she had watched her parents do so many times growing up. Her Bible lay open before her. Her journal rested beside it. And for the first time in a long time, she stopped trying to have all the answers. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Lord, I don't understand what you're doing, but I trust you. If the doors you closed weren't meant for me, then lead me to the ones you have prepared." She surrendered every dream, every disappointment, every fear, and every unanswered question, placing them at God's feet. In the quietness of that room, she remembered a truth that had carried her since childhood. God has never asked us to understand every step. He simply asks us to trust the one who already knows the destination. And that night, Eliana stopped praying for her plans to succeed and started praying for God's purpose to be fulfilled.
Lord, I give this to you. I've found clarity and I know where to go now.
As Eliana continued reading, one verse seemed to leap from the pages of Scripture. "You shall have no other gods before me." In that moment, God wasn't condemning her. He was lovingly reminding her who belonged at the center of her life. Success had never been the problem. Making success her identity was. Approval had never been the goal. Purpose had always been. As she sat quietly in his presence, The truth began replacing every lie she had believed. She was never defined by her career. She was never measured by promotions. She was never loved because of her accomplishments. She was already chosen, already loved, already enough. For the first time in years, Eliana wasn't asking God what she had lost. She was finally seeing what he had been preparing all along. Her voice wasn't given to build a platform. It was given to point people back to him.
Thank you all. This is my story of finding purpose and faith in the smallest moments.
God had answered her prayer, not by giving her a different dream, but by giving her a different reason for pursuing it. The gift had never changed. The purpose behind the gift had no longer driven by applause or the pressure to prove herself. Eliana began using her voice the way God had always intended. She shared stories that inspired hope, stories that reminded people they weren't forgotten, stories that pointed broken hearts back to Jesus. Whether she stood before 5 people or 500, her mission remained the same. She wasn't building a platform. She was building the kingdom. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't chasing purpose anymore. She was walking in it.
This is a season of quiet thanksgiving and bold steps. New season, same God, bigger plans.
I have finished writing what God put on my heart. Now I rest in his plan.
Every closed door, every disappointment, every season of waiting had been preparing Eliana for this moment. As the morning sun filled Willow Creek, she opened a fresh journal, not to write her own plans, but to record the vision God had placed in her heart. She finally understood that her story had never been about building a successful career. It had always been about building lives. Her voice would encourage. Her words would heal. Her testimony would remind others that God's timing is never late. With a peaceful smile, she wrote the first words of a brand new chapter, not defined by fear, not driven by approval, but completely surrendered to God's purpose. Because sometimes God allows many no's to prepare us for the one yes that changes everything. This wasn't the end of Eliana's story. It was only the beginning of the assignment God had been preparing her for all along. As the sun began to rise over Willow Creek, Eliana smiled, not because every question had been answered, but because she had finally learned that peace doesn't come from having the perfect plan. It comes from trusting the one who does. She had stopped chasing approval and started walking in purpose. She closed another chapter, but this wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Every page she had written, every prayer she had prayed, every lesson she had learned, had prepared her for what God would do next. So she stepped forward, not because she knew every detail, but because she knew the one who was leading her. Sometimes faith isn't about seeing the whole road. It's about trusting God enough to take the next step. Sometimes it takes several no's before God reveals the one yes that changes everything. Eliana's journey isn't over. In fact, it's only just beginning. Join us next time as God continues writing the story only He could tell.